welcome to another episode of Beautiful, Bad and Bizarre. Today we're here at Golders Green Crematorium to remember the lives of two of my favourite people, Sheree Winton and Dale Winton. Sheree Winton was born Shirley June Patrick on the 4th of November 1935 in Sheffield. Her mother, Elizabeth, who went by her middle name of Joan, was born and raised in Caterham, Surrey, but during the war she moved to Sheffield. Sheree's father, who'd enlisted in the military, would be reported as missing in action, presumed dead during the Second World War. Soon after, Joan began seeing someone else and became pregnant with her second child, a son called Norman. However, much to her shock, Joan's husband was to return from the war very much alive. The couple reconciled, and Sheree's third sibling, a brother called Joe, was born. Sadly, the marriage wasn't to last, and soon after Joe's birth, Joan was left to bring up all three children on her own. At 16, Sheree, who had always been an independent child, decided to leave home and move into a bedsit, with ambitions, dreams and aspirations of making a better life for herself. She soon took the gigantic step of moving to London, and in 1953, at the age of 17, she took a job as a receptionist in a detective agency. Not long after moving to London, that same year, Cherie met and began dating Gary Winner, who at 41 was 21 years older than Sheree. Gary Winner owned a small furniture shop in Islington called the Angel Bedding Company. Quite soon, Gary, who was Jewish, had proposed and Sheree had accepted. Although she needed her mother's permission to get married as she was still only 17, permission was granted and the plans were made, which included Sheree converting from Church of England to Gary's religion. Joan got on very well with Gary, however, it seemed things weren't the same for Sheree with Gary's family, and there were some issues which apparently caused Sheree to insist that Gary changed his surname by deed poll from Winner to Winton. Despite tensions between Sheree and the Winner family, the couple were very much in love and soon were thrilled to find out they were expecting a baby. And at the age of 19, on the 22nd of May 1955, at a clinic in Marylebone, London, Sheree gave birth to their son, who she would name after a handsome Hollywood actor called Dale Robertson, who played a character called Jim Hardy in a popular television western called Wells Fargo, a show that Sheree was watching in the clinic when her son was born. Shortly after Dale's birth, problems began to arise in the marriage. Sheree, who was now just in her 20s, wanted to go out and socialise, but Gary had purchased a television for the first time and was completely obsessed with it. After work and at weekends, all he wanted to do was watch TV. Frustrated and feeling bored and restless, Sheree exploded one day, telling him, "You're obsessed with that goggle box, and however dreary the programme, I can't drag you away from it." Gary's response was, "If you're so clever, why don't you go and work on it yourself?" It was a flippant, spur-of-the-moment remark, but Sheree was ready for the challenge. The next day she went out, and with no background in show business, no training in acting or modelling, Sheree managed to get herself a theatrical agent, and with a change of name from Shirley to Sheree, 2 weeks later, Sheree Winton was appearing on the TV game show Take Your Pick, presented by Michael Miles. Gary was astounded, but he was also thrilled and very proud of his wife. For Sheree, it was the start of a glittering career in show business, and in the late 1950s and early 60s, she established herself as a familiar face of stage, screen and television. In 1957, she appeared in the TV film A Short History of Man and Music with Spike Milligan and Kenneth Connor, to name just a few of the stars. That same year, she also appeared in the film Miracle in Soho, which featured the wonderful John Gregson, Billy Whitelaw and the stunning Belinda Lee. The film was made at Pinewood Studios for the Rank organisation. Dale Winton was later to say that his mother was an unconventional woman for the times, and yet she was also a traditionalist. She wasn't a feminist, and she believed that men had their roles and women had theirs. Cherie brought her son up to open doors for women and to walk the closest side of the road, something he was never able to shake off, and Dale said in the 1990s, "I still do what I was first taught." Cherie was aware of the advantages of education. She made sure Dale attended school. She was actively involved with his education, reviewing his school reports, going to events and meeting with his teachers regularly. During his childhood, Dale had various health issues, including asthma and eczema, for which he took medication. He was also struggling with his weight, which was to become a lifelong problem for him. He said he was a yo-yo dieter throughout his life. In October 1958, Cherie was playing opposite Sir Laurence Olivier in the film The Devil's Disciple, although she had no dialogue. The same month, her husband Gary was making his own headlines, accused of striking a neighbouring female shop manager for apparently calling him a name and suggesting he was living off his wife's earnings. The woman denied bringing Cherie into the argument. However, Gary was conditionally discharged, and both Gary and the woman involved were bound over to keep the peace. Cherie was extremely upset by it all, telling a reporter, "Everything I earn is mine to spend as I want. I never give Gary any money. He pays for the home, my clothes, everything." During the 1960s, Cherie was very much in demand. In January 1963, Cherie undertook a 3-month tour of New York, the Bahamas, California and Rome. The same year, she also appeared in the TV series Espionage, playing a stripper. Cherie also worked alongside Eric Morecambe and Ernie Wise on their 3rd series of the popular Morecambe and Wise show for ATV. She was also supporting Terry Thomas on his own TV show on the BBC. Cherie had a small role in the Beatles film Hard Day's Night in 1964, and in 1965 she had another small part alongside Sean Connery in the James Bond film Thunderball. Dale remembered his mother collecting autographs from the cast for him and his schoolmates being so impressed that his mum was a Bond girl. Cherie was also to work with Diana Dawes on various shows, including the Bob Monkhouse Hour in 1963. While on the set of Misleading Cases with Alistair Sim in 1968, Cherie introduced the young Dale to Diana Dawes, and over the years they were to meet again several times. Dale would become friends with Diana and her husband Alan Lake. Dale recalled that most of the people his mother worked with were always so nice to him, and in particular he said he would always remember Sid James, who Cherie worked with in the stage production of Solid Gold Cadillac in 1965. Dale said Sid was such a lovely man. Cherie's career took a toll on her marriage to Gary, along with the fact that she had been having an affair. On Tuesday, the 15th of November 1966, Cherie offered no defence in the divorce court when Gary Winton was granted a divorce on the grounds of his wife's adultery. Dale had never been close to his father and had, at times, quite a tense relationship with him. As Dale remembered in his 2002 autobiography, Dale Winton, My Story, I'll leave the details for the book in the description of this video, he was always a bullish man who had a fiery temper, and I feared him in many ways. Gary Winton died after an illness on the 7th of September 1968. He was 54 years old. Gary was buried at Hoop Lane Cemetery just opposite Golders Green Crematorium on the 9th of September 1968. Dale was just 13 years old. Cherie was to marry one more time in December 1968 to Norman Izzo, who owned a restaurant in London's Soho. At the same time, Cherie decided to give up her career in show business with the intention of having another child. However, this was not to be. The marriage was not successful and the couple divorced in 1971, and Cherie told a newspaper reporter that she intended to return to film and television work. But Cherie never returned to full-time work again. Her last appearance was in the film Rhubarb with Eric Sykes and some of the greatest names in comedy, including Hattie Jacques, Jimmy Edwards and Harry Seacombe. At this time, Dale and Cherie were living in Hatch End in northwest London. Dale said, "Mum just stopped work and we lived very happily off of her investments. She was very clever with money. We lived in a lovely house and had a marvellous lifestyle." Dale's own career wasn't exactly how Cherie had thought it would be. She was expecting Dale to become a doctor, a lawyer or even an accountant. However, when she realised that Dale was interested in making a career in show business, she was incredibly encouraging. Dale said that his mother believed in doing things as well as you possibly could, no matter what you decided to do. In the summer of 1971, Dale, who'd wanted to be in the music business, was offered a job in the stockroom of HMV, Oxford Street, stacking and shrink-wrapping records in polyfilm. It may not have been quite what he had in mind, but it was a means to an end. Dale saw it as a good beginning. He said it was the job from heaven, as he loved looking at the new releases as they came in. It was during 1971, while at work, that Dale had been given the news that his mother was in hospital. She had attempted to take her own life but had survived. Dale said he was absolutely distraught, desperately shaken up and upset. She promised her son that she would never do it again. Unfortunately, over the following years, the attempts continued. Dale lived in constant fear. Dale Winton left HMV and was now a full-time DJ doing lunchtime and evening discos, often leaving home at 11 a.m. in the morning but not returning until 3:30 a.m. the following day. Cherie had been going through a difficult time. She was regretting the decision to give up work. She was angry with herself for not sticking with acting. She had auditioned for the role of Purdy in the new Avengers, but Joanna Lumley had got the part. Life had become an impossible struggle. Dale was working and living his own life. Cherie was suffering from unbearable insomnia, and she had been prescribed sleeping tablets, but unfortunately she became dependent on them and was admitted to a clinic early in 1976. After she was discharged from the clinic, she suffered a relapse and someone else was giving her tablets that she hadn't been prescribed. Once again, Cherie tried to get her life back on track and she seemed to be doing really well. Where she had previously been staying in her bedroom for weeks on end, she'd started going out more with her friends, socialising and accepting invitations to the theatre and to eat out. Everyone was delighted, none more so than Dale. On Friday, the 28th of May 1976, Cherie made Dale breakfast, something she hadn't done for a long time, and as Dale left for work he remembered thinking what a beautiful day it was. That evening he was working at Charlie Brown's nightclub, Tottenham, when at about 11 p.m. the manager told Dale his mother was on the phone. This was very unusual for Cherie to phone her son while he was working. When Dale came to the phone, Cherie asked him in an angry tone of voice where her prescription was. She told him he should have picked it up for her from the doctor's that day. Dale had no idea what she was talking about. He didn't remember her asking him to collect a prescription for her. The conversation ended with Cherie angrily telling him not to come home that night and slamming the phone down. Dale was bewildered and upset, but continued on with his gig. On his return home, Cherie had put a "Do Not Disturb" sign on her bedroom door, but this wasn't unusual. On the Saturday morning, the sign was still on the door, so Dale continued with his usual routine. It was only when a friend phoned later that day who'd arranged to go out with Cherie and asked Dale to ask her if she still wanted to go. Dale knocked on his mother's door, but there was no response and the door was locked. Cherie had finally succeeded. By the time they reached her, she was no longer alive. Dale was to say that it was an unspeakable horror. He stood there crying hysterically, feeling instantly ill and sick at the same time. She had left 2 notes, one for a former lover and one for Dale, who was utterly heartbroken. It was just 7 days after Dale's 21st birthday. The following 5 years were a complete blur, and the deepest sense of loss haunted Dale. He missed his mother terribly. She had tied up all the loose ends. She had made a will, and she'd left Dale financially secure. However, in his grief, Dale sold the family home and he bought a place in the Midlands. He turned to spending money mostly on travel and fast cars. He later said in 1994, "I should be a very wealthy man now because my mother left me well provided for, but I'm not. I had some bad advice and I got through so much money so quickly. She would have been horrified if she'd seen me getting through the money." The pain of losing his mother never left Dale. He said, "You don't recover from something like that. I felt bereft and I kept thinking, what would Mum do in this situation? What would her advice be? We were very close and I still feel she's somewhere out there watching over me." She was a great believer in spiritualism and I'm fascinated by it, but I'd never go to a medium to make contact with her. She told me not to. Cherie had told Dale in the final note that she left behind that she did not want him to try and contact her. Dale Winton went on to carve out a fabulous career for himself, working primarily as a journalist and radio presenter. He worked for Nottingham's Radio Trent and Wolverhampton's Beacon Radio, as well as for American Forces Network in Vienna. Eventually, Dale began getting offers for television presenting, making regular appearances on the satellite quiz show Anything for Money with Andrew O'Connor and the Bobby Davro Show. Dale also presented Pet Watch for BBC One, the National Lottery, Pets Win Prizes and a whole host of popular television shows, including possibly his most famous TV game show, Dale's Supermarket Sweep. In 1993, which Dale saw as his big break, the show continued until 2007 with over 600 episodes. Dale Winton was fiercely private about his personal life. It wasn't until 2002 that Dale publicly revealed that he was gay in his autobiography, Dale, My Story. Dale had returned to London and had always hoped to find the right partner with whom he could share his life, but sadly things didn't appear to work out for him. He continued to make appearances on radio and television, and on February the 8th, 2018, Dale Winton's Florida Fly Drive, his own travel programme on Channel 5, debuted. Dale had many loyal friends, including Barbara Windsor, Gloria Hunniford, Christopher Biggins and Claire Sweeney, and David Williams, to name just a few. Dale Winton was also a much-loved godfather to 3 godsons and was deeply loved by all those that knew him. Sadly, Dale Winton passed away unexpectedly at his home in North London. He was aged 62 on the 18th of April 2018. He'd been having a cup of tea and he'd told his assistant he wasn't feeling great and that he would go upstairs and have a bath. She went upstairs 5 minutes later and found him dead in bed. Prior to his death, Dale had spent years suffering with health issues, including a heart complaint, arthritis, and asthma, and at the start of 2018, Dale revealed that he'd undergone 4 surgeries for shoulder and knee problems. At the time of his death, he was also dealing with a chest infection. The coroner ruled that Dale Winton died of natural causes. A non-religious humanist ceremony was held at Old Church, Marylebone Road in London on the 22nd of May 2018, on what would have been Dale's 63rd birthday. According to his friend and LBC radio host Steve Allen, Dale was worried that people wouldn't show up to his funeral. After the service, Steve said, "He would have been so thrilled with the coverage. This is what he worried about, the funeral. We'd had this chat for many years." Dale's mother, Cherie, had been cremated and laid to rest in the southern garden at Golders Green Crematorium, just across the road from Hoop Lane Cemetery, where Dale's father was buried. 4 months after Dale Winton's funeral, his ashes were buried in the southern garden next to his mother, Cherie, in a private service. In loving memory of Sheree Winton, beloved mother of Dale, the 4th of November 1935 to the 29th of May 1976. Dale Winton, the 22nd of May 1955 to the 18th of April 2018. A much-loved son, godfather and friend. I brought along a bouquet of the most colourful roses that I could find for Dale and his mum. Thank you so much for joining me in this step back in time. I hope you enjoyed the video and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.